In this video, I want to share some more culture shocks I've experienced as an American in Singapore, so let's get started. Culture shock, according to dictionary.cambridge.org, is a feeling of confusion felt by someone visiting a country or place that they do not know. So some people view culture shock as a negative thing, but I view culture shock as something that's positive, something that really forces you out of your comfort zone to learn and embrace a new culture, especially if you're moving to a new country. Culture shock is inevitable sometimes. No matter how much research you do in your home country about a foreign country that you're about to move to, no amount of research is going to suffice you actually living in that foreign country. That's why I created a YouTube channel to share some of the differences that I've noticed living in Singapore as an expat. I hope you find one or two things on this channel helpful. Number one, so a culture shock in Singapore has to do with not wearing your shoes indoors. It's not common to wear shoes inside the home in Singapore. In the US, this depends on the household. US is really a melting pot of cultures. So depending on the household, you may or may not wear shoes inside the home. So for me, I lived in different apartments, different types of homes, and there are some places where everybody wore shoes inside the home, and there are some places where no one wore shoes inside the home. Please let me know what your preference is. Do you wear shoes inside the home? Do you think it's acceptable to wear shoes inside the home? Let me know in the comment section below. Another culture shock has to do with fish skin chips. So prior to moving to Singapore, I've never heard of fish skin chips. I've never tried fish skin chips. One of the common brands is Irvin's. Irvin's salted egg chips are really popular, especially in recent years. You can now find them in the US at some Asian supermarkets. The salted egg is the most popular, but they also have other flavors. Another culture shock has to do with military obligations. So prior to moving to Singapore, I didn't know that military service is mandatory in Singapore for Singaporeans, male Singaporeans, as well as second generation male permanent residents of Singapore. So generally, you're obligated to do 2 years of service. After 2 years, you have to fulfill your reservist obligations until the age of 40 or 50 years old if you're an officer. Singaporeans and second generation permanent residents have had to serve military service since 1967. Another culture shock has to do with people being multilingual. Most Singaporeans speak at least 2 languages. And something that was really interesting and a little bit shocking to me in the work environment was hearing 4 or 5 different languages spoken at the same time. In the US, occasionally I would hear someone speak a second language, but I've never experienced a situation like in Singapore where 4, 5, 6 different languages were spoken frequently. In the US, roughly 20% of Americans speak a second language. Another culture shock has to do with the currency in Singapore. When it comes to bills, there are 7 denominations ranging from $2 all the way up to $10,000. I was really surprised that there's a $10,000 bill and a $1,000 bill. The most common bills you'll see are the $2 up to $100. The bills in Singapore are really sturdy. They're made of a polymer, so they're very strong, and it's unlikely that you'll see tears in them. In the US, the currency is made of paper, so you'll see lots of creases or words written on the bills. Currently, Singapore doesn't have a $1 bill. As of 1999, there's no $1 bill. Prior to 1999, there was a $1 bill. Another culture shock has to do with voting. In Singapore, voting in an election is compulsory. In Singapore, if you don't vote, you'll be asked to pay a penalty. If you don't provide an adequate reason, they'll put you on a list where you'll be disqualified to vote in future elections. So you need to fill out a form and provide a valid reason for you not being able to vote. You need to pay the $50 in order to be able to vote again in the future. Another culture shock that I've had in Singapore has to do with the number of acronyms used in Singapore. There are so many different acronyms in Singapore. There's an acronym for food, such as Bak Kut Teh, BKT. There are acronyms for the train, MRT, LRT. There are acronyms for schools, universities, SMU, NTU, NUS. There's an acronym for high school or junior college, JC. There are also acronyms for the freeways or the expressways in Singapore, AYE, PIE. In order to buy a car in Singapore, you'll need a COE. certificate of entitlement. If you stand in line or if you queue, the acronym for Q is just the letter Q. I just find the use of acronyms in Singapore really fascinating. Thank you so much for your support and thank you so much for subscribing.